Buongiorno Mondo, and welcome back to 15 with Vasco, the podcast. I couldn't be happier to have with me today Claudia Del Re. Good morning.
Good morning,
Buongiorno.
Vasco. So happy to be with you today.
I am so happy to have you here with me as well. So Claudia Del Re, you can read a lot about her in the podcast notes, but she is an attorney here in Florence, and we're going to talk, and Milan as well, and we're going to talk a little bit today about what Claudia does, sort of the state of things in Italy in terms of the law, but not only. And I hope she'll also share with us some insights about important things like luxury and wine and the Made in Italy label. So I wanted to start, my first question for you, Claudia, is I want you to talk a little bit about your fields of expertise. So I mentioned that you're an attorney, but your specializations, let's say, are intellectual property, luxury,
Yes.
and sort of everything that falls under that umbrella. So let's start by talking about what you do, what kind of work you do.
I can say that I'm one of the luckiest attorney ever because I'm used to define myself the attorney of the beauty. If you think that law of fashion, if you think that law of luxury, if you think that law of wineries and so on, are, at least for the Italian culture, for the Italian knowledge, for the Italian made in Italy, the top, I'm very, very lucky to say that I'm dealing every day with fashion stylists, with fashion models, with photographers, with musicians, but also wine context. So my focus every day is to guide them into the beauty world in order to protect their ideas, in order to develop your projects, in order to exploit in a legal way their ideas. Because if you think a lawyer is just not the one who is going to defend you in courts, but it's also a kind of guide that push you in the correct way to enhance, to exploit your ideas. Is exactly my role in the beauty context.
I love that. I love how you describe that and you immediately bring it back to beauty, which is so Italian. And I think as Americans, or as an American, I don't know if you know this about me, but I wanted to be a lawyer at a certain point.
Didn't know that.
I did. And I actually wanted to be an intellectual property lawyer.
Nah.
Yeah, because I was working in the music business and I've always been really interested in, I'm a creative person. And so I've always been interested in the idea of, well, really the importance of, preserving one's intellectual property. And so I find your field particularly intriguing and important, and especially right now at this moment in time. And I want to talk about that with you. Because I think you play a very important role in helping people make sure that their creations, and whatever those creations may be, are protected. So can you give me an example of, for example, how you would do that with a fashion designer or with an important wine label? But sort of how does that work play out specifically with your clients?
Of course, the legal guide depends on the creations that you have in front of you. So in the fashion context, think about a garment, think about accessory, think about, let's say, a pair of shoes. But also think about the slogan, the claim, how to a fashion brand promote itself. So in this context, my role is to guide them to select, first of all, the right logo for their product, but also the right claim to be recognized and to be distinguishable by others. In comparison, the right way to protect the design. Because if you design a pair of shoes, so the sketch has to be protected in order to be recognized the author of that design, even though you work for a firm, a very high-level fashion brand, or you are a start-upper, because so many foreign students nowadays here in Italy wish to launch a new startup in the fashion context because they bring their foreign creativity and the fine Italian know-how, the perfect combination to create something new. So of course, with them, I start really from guiding from the selection of the proper signs, designs, again, way to communicate, even in the Italian culture, but in the Italian legislation. Totally different is when you talk about wine, for example.
Yeah.
Because wine, but also jewelry sector. Of course, Italy, but has every kind of country has its own very specific legislation for product like wine because it's akin to food culture. So anything which has had a very public impact in the customer because you are talking about something which is attached to health.
Yeah.
Therefore, it's not just a matter of luxury, beauty, but it's also a matter of public interest, of the respect of the health of the customer. So I have to combine these three knowledges all together, guiding them to what? Create a very appealing label. So nice, distinguishable, but in the meantime, that I have to be sure that the creator or the winery firm is going to create a legal label. So in order to report all the information that the Italian and European legislation prescribes us. In the meantime, jewelry. You have no idea how difficult it is to protect nowadays a jeweler.
Why?
Yes.
Why, Claudia? I didn't know that. Why is jewelry so complicated?
Italian culture, specifically in Florence,
Yeah.
where jewelry has a very old style, whole history of craftsmanship, and where the know-how is so difficult to be protected.
Yeah.
The Florentine handmade style, it's something that is very, very actually rare.
Yeah.
And nowadays it's going to be lost or might be lost because of the difficulties to protect the cultural heritage. And we don't have specifically, right now at least, guidelines from the legislator that are helpful to protect this kind of craftsmanship. So we try using the intellectual property laws, general laws, to adapt them to protect craftsmanship.
Okay.
But it's not enough. So I guide these artisans with some strategies, with some tips, in order to help them, to protect the stamps, in order to register the materials they are using. So basically protecting their trade secrets. I'm trying to guide them to be aware that what they are doing is a secret. If you don't do that, and if you don't make them aware of that, everything will be lost in few years.
It's so important that you mentioned this, and I'm so glad that you are doing work in this regard because I fear this. I fear that some of these great traditions are already being lost.
Yes.
And if there isn't a way to guarantee that those traditions are not only upheld, but that they are documented, that you are doing this work with artisans so that they know that if not, I mean, this is something that belongs to, it's sort of patrimony for the world, right? Yeah. And so I think the work you do is so critical, especially this time in history where we're also battling with other things that are interfering with our intellectual property, like, for example, AI. Do we want to talk a little bit about that already? I mean, just why not dive right into a conversation about AI?
Yes.
Because
basically, when we talk about AI, we talk totally different topic. I mean, in comparison with craftsmanship,
Yeah.
Because we are in the opposite worlds. But they do have the same problem, which is how to protect a craftsmanship product creation, whatever, or know how to make a manufacturing product on one side. On the other side, how to protect a creation, if it's possible, done with AI. Is it possible to create something which is exactly the declination of an AI system? Who is going to be the author? And who is going to protect the personal effort that you have put into the AI software? Who can be said what is made by whom?
Exactly.
But somehow they have the same problem. Because, of course, for the artisan, the problem is that not all the intellectual property rights as they are codified can help them to protect. On the other side, with the legal instruments that we have, intellectual property treaties and regulations right now, we don't have exactly, in terms of copyright, the perfect tool to verify who has done what. With the regulation, with the European regulation of the AI right now, but actually it's going to be implemented because it's just common force, we might have some inspiration, some guidelines. So let's see what is going on in terms of implementation, and for sure in the next years we could have some more answers regarding to that.
Yeah, I think we're going to. I think there's going to have to be more and more legislation because it's gotten to a point where it's very frightening.
Yes.
That somebody, I'm sure you've heard and seen the same things I have, but taking a famous singer's voice,
Yeah.
and doing it's frightening that
Yeah.
somebody could appropriate your voice,
Yes.
your words,
Yes.
your creations. And I was thinking just of something like that, a handmade gold necklace in Florence, right? That's made with a centuries old technique. But then, what if there's just, an algorithm, an AI, you throw, 3 ingredients into the mix and then this comes out, but who does who holds that, the patent, or who's intellectual property is
Yeah.
it really? And it just
Yeah.
seems to me that it's getting much more complicated. And so there
Yeah.
is going to be a need for not only more legislation, but people need to be protected.
Yeah.
People's ideas need to be protected.
Yeah.
I find it very frightening that
Yeah.
these things exist, that this could happen. I want to go back to, you mentioned very briefly students
Yeah.
in Florence, or young people who come to Florence with maybe sort of a more, I don't know, a forward-thinking or innovative approach to a startup, but they want to use sort of Italian craftsmanship or the tradition, the amazing artisanal tradition in the country. And I know that you teach. You teach both at Polimoda and at University of Florence. So talk to me a little bit about your teaching. What do you teach, and what are the kinds of things that you find young people who are taking your classes are really interested in right now?
I do teach exactly the same field that I was mentioning before, so the same field that I'm practicing as attorney. So intellectual property, fashion law, luxury law, and recently patent law. So for those technicians, they decide to invent a new machine, a new engine, something which is very actually far from me, but in terms of legal reconstruction, legal organization, we are dealing with the same stuff.
Okay.
What is crucial, teaching to young students these topics, either foreign student and Italian student, is that they are really, really astonished by the fact that without a legal protection, without a legal guidance, you could risk that every kind of movement, creation, creativity you are going to insert in the world is going to be useless. That means that if you don't have the right legal dress for your creation, you might risk to lose it. In which sense? People copy everything. So if you don't want to lose your creation, if you don't want to insert your creativity in the world without the risk to be totally infringed, what you have to do is, before knowing the instruments, to create something which is sustainable, which has its own life, which has to have its own protection. So when I used to say to them, well, guys, it's not just about being creative. It's also about to be legally creative. So they are like, What does it mean? Is that not necessary to be a creative director, to be an artist, to be a creative startupper? Well, of course, it is the base. But if you don't combine it with a legal general awareness, I'm used to say that you don't have to be a lawyer. Of course, you're going to have your lawyers.
Right.
But to have a general awareness about how to move the right step before presenting your idea to an investor, present your creation to, let's say, a brand, present your project to a bank. If you don't present in a legal way, in a protected way, well,
anyone could just steal it from you.
Of course.
So what advice do you give these young, because you're teaching both young attorneys, future attorneys, and also fashion students.
Yes.
So you're getting both sides of it. You're teaching the people who are going to want to get their intellectual property protected, and then you're teaching people who potentially will be protecting their intellectual property. So what advice do you give to young people who are creatives who want, if I, for example, I said to you, Claudia, I have an invention and I want, to patent it, or I have an idea or something, whatever. What do I do? What are the steps here in Italy?
First step, never disclose to anyone except for your mother and your lawyer. You laugh, but it's reality.
No, I agree. You know how I feel about attorney-client privilege.
It's incredible. Because if you talk to your husband, to your boyfriend, you never know because they become ex-husband, ex-boyfriend. Just your mother could keep your secret and then your lawyer because you pay it. So first of all, secrecy.
Yeah.
First step. Secondly, you start putting everything in writing. It seems to be stupid, but it's not. Because as long as you don't keep it writing, international copyright laws do not recognize your idea. Because ideas, I'm used to say to students, fly in the sky. So no one could protect the ideas, but everyone could protect the graphic representation of the ideas.
Okay.
So, second step, you put everything in writing. Third step, you ask for a legal consultation, or depends, of course, in terms of the creation that you are going to do. So basically, if you are going to create a design, you're going to go to a design consultant, legal consultant. If you are, I don't know, a technician to an engineer, maybe you write something or you create something which is, let's assume, an engine. You have to go to a patent attorney. So, of course, you have to ask the perfect consultation for you in order to make them study, to give you the perfect, consultation, how to develop this, how to modify that, and then, final step, in case to register your trademark, your design, your patent, or in case of copyright, because guys, copyright must not be registered. Copyright arises automatically in the moment you create your article, your romance, your music, your lyrics. In that moment, you are automatically protected. And here, specifically for copyright, any legal strategy could be very, very useful in order to be the musician of the future without the fear to be copied and to be infringed. So, step by step, it's a path that you have to respect in order to be fully confident that at least as a matter of, protection and awareness about your creation, you're fine.
Which is fundamental because it's hard enough to be, I think, a creative person in the world today. And it's fundamental to have that that awareness that it's wonderful to be an artist, to be a creative, but you really need to make sure that you're protected.
Fully agree. You know what I'm used to say to students? I'm saying, being an artist is like being a mother. So in which sense? You create someone, you create something. But the mother is just not the one who creates, who make the baby birth. But then the mother is the one who feeds every single day the baby.
Yeah.
If you don't feed your creation, if you don't protect your creation, if you don't help your creation to have 2 legs, 2 arms, 2 eyes, well, basically your baby will die.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, no differences.
It's a very good analogy. It's important because it shows us that we need to be very smart about the work that we put out there.
Yeah.
And especially today, I think more than ever, where it's so easy, everything is so fast. And even, the technology, even something simple like showing a friend, your design or a sketch, and it could be, appropriated,
Oh, wow,
right?
yes.
And so there are so many ways now.
Yes.
Conversations can be recorded, photographs can be taken. You know what I'm saying? It feels now like that much more, I don't want to use the word dangerous, but kind of risky.
Yes.
Risky.
Yes.
Just because we're constantly being filmed, we're constantly being photographed. We just have access to things that we didn't have access to before. So let's talk about Made in Italy, because this is something that I think a lot of our listeners, of course, know. Italian fashion or followers of Italian fashion, but I want you to speak specifically about what Made in Italy really is, what that means, and why it's so important, and what the country does to actively really protect the Made in Italy label.
First of all, let's forget that Made in Italy is a trademark.
Okay.
Made in Italy is a designation of origin. Basically, Made in Italy is a label, administrative label, that could be placed only in specific conditions into specific products. So not all the products that in Italy can be labeled with the Made in Italy thing.
Okay.
Just food thing, just machines, basically vehicles, and then anything which is related to fashion and garments, of course, accessories. But here we have a specific legislation for the Made in Italy that specify the major sectors that could be recognized by this label.
Okay.
Secondly, it's not a trademark. What does it mean? You cannot go and then register, let's assume, the word papi as your trademark and then put Made in Italy as it is just because it has been made in Italy. Actually, Made in Italy, it's something that you can put on specific product only and if you respect specific conditions. That is, your product must be either entirely made in Italy, 100%. So materials, manufacturing, production, marketing, everything realized in Italy.
Okay.
Or 2/3 of the main phases of production have been placed in Italy.
Okay.
2/3. What is 2/3? Depends on the product, on the typology of product.
Okay.
So for each and every product which is assumed to be labeled by the legislation and the Made in Italy regulation, due to the guidelines of the ministry, the Italian Ministry of the Made in Italy and Economic Development, we know which are the typical phases of the production of specific product. So we have to consider that the 2/3, which is 2 main phases of the production on the three top,
Okay.
must be realized entirely in Italy. For example, let's assume, a piece of, textiles, a scarf.
Okay.
Normally, a scarf, you can consider that the main material must be created. So, let's say worked
Okay.
here in Italy.
Okay.
Then can be, for example, designed also in Italy. The design of the scarf itself. The process of manufacturing, so the final step of manufacturing could be placed outside. And therefore, in these cases, normally it is placed outside in order to pay less,
Obviously.
of course.
Where labor is less expensive.
Okay. But the evaluation of these 3 phases must be done carefully. Because in case of controls conducted by the police and the public authority of Italy, if you are not going to respect the 2 major phases on 3, you're gonna be, in problem. It could incur in problems.
Like
Fines. Several
fines. Yeah.
Yes. So even for this, a very previous check and a very fine and delicate previous check must be conducted.
Okay.
Yes.
And you help clients with this stuff as well?
I have customers with this stuff as well. I work with the Chamber of Commerce of Florence and Milan, depends of course where the client is. Because as you might imagine, Florence and Milan nowadays are the two cities where we can say that, come on, in
I
Italy.
think we can. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
In Italy we have the Renaissance and therefore everything which is related to arts. Don't forget that the Uffizi Gallery is the first museum of the world to be visited. So there must be a reason.
Yeah.
On the other side, Milan is the innovation, where all the major multinational firms have headquarters in Italy.
Yeah.
So depending, of course, on the type of firm I'm assisting, I work with the correspondent Chamber of Commerce. That nowadays in Italy, specifically for science, made in, is very, very well prepared.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Definitely.
Also because I recall some high-profile cases over the past few years where there were violations. Because I wasn't aware until you just broke it down. And I don't know that the average person out there knows all the requirements of the Made in Italy label. I had no idea. I mean, I actually assumed that everything had to be, 100% here, whatever. But there have been a couple of very high-profile cases in various sectors, in the fashion sector, about bags being, that's a huge one, about all of the incredibly expensive luxury bags just being finished, and I'm putting up my air quotes here, literally the brand is just stuck to it, in Italy, and then, there were scandals about that, scandals about olive oil.
Yep.
And if I remember a big scandal a few years ago about Brunello di Montalcino, right?
I just remember that.
And you deal with wine, you work a lot with wine. You also have an important position. If you want to talk a little bit, because I think wine, you and I have talked about this before, probably over drinks, probably over a nice glass of wine. But right now, wine is probably one of Italy's most important luxury exports. Am I right?
I would say the first one.
The first one, yeah.
And honestly, according to my IP lawyer perspective, is going to be the future.
I agree.
More than fashion. Guys, fashion is going to move. I think that Asia, I know that could be weird, but don't forget that Indian manufacturership, for specifically the textile guys, the silk, and the less cost that they have there, well, I think they will put some problems with us. I mean, in the future.
The future.
For the winery sector, we have the land, we have the climate, we have the weather. So I don't think that's something, apart from the climate changes, of course, but actually it's something that is going to be everywhere in the world. But this is something that could resist.
Yeah.
Fashion and luxury, I'm not so sure that I'm just predicting in the next, let's say, 30, 50 years, it's not going to be something that if you were not working on something that could change the system, could change the methods, I'm not so sure that it's going to be the future.
Thank you once again for tuning in to this week's episode of 15 with Fosca and for continuing to do so. Grazie mille e alla prossima volta.